Hello and welcome to my friend the Rainbow Circle, episode 59. Um, Bo says hello. In my previous episode, I talked about Kanye West and how he was doing expert heel work in choosing Taylor Swift as his face counterpart in the heel face dynamic. Um, And so I am a big Taylor Swift fan. I have no shame about that. Never be ashamed to love what you love. Um, I don't have really refined or elitist taste in music, but I think she's magnificent. Um, with no shame. So, but I think she helps out with something that I've been searching for in writing fiction, which is a good replacement for the iceberg. And I've talked about this in a previous essay. I'm not sure how to boil this down. Siku is destroying things. Siku, why are you destroying things? I'm not sure how to boil this down. He knocked out a light, so it's a little bit darker right now. Hold on just a second. The chaos of pet parenting is a nonstop source of delight and frustration and delay, paradoxically, which is actually what I'm about to talk about. So, just as a reminder, my true fans, my millions and millions and millions of true fans who know my videos intimately, will of course remember the video I did on the Iceberg, which is one of my most hated creative writing cliches. I hate most creative writing cliches. However, that's one of the ones I hate the most. But it has some measure of validity, but it's so vague and it's really bad metaphor. It's one tiny cold thing on the top, another cold, very, very slow moving thing on the bottom. But there's really no clear indication of what the tiny cold thing on the top is or what the tiny cold thing on the bottom is. The only thing the iceberg really identifies is just that there's a difference between what you say and what you leave unsaid. So the replacement that I've been using for years now, just in describing it, is playing drunk, which is not my favorite phrasing. It's better than the iceberg, for sure. It's exponentially better than the iceberg. But playing drunk is just an acting idea that if you're playing a drunk character on stage, a drunk person wouldn't try to be drunk. A drunk person would try not to be drunk. And that is a much more effective dynamic. That contrast between being something on the surface, sober, when clearly you're something else under the surface, drunk, creates a dynamic tension. Whereas an iceberg, there's something hidden, but it's cold, unmoving, and it can be anything. It's dense. It's filled with nothing but ice. The exact same thing on the top. The iceberg is a terrible metaphor. So, but Taylor Swift has a fantastic array of examples of where what she's saying on the surface, is contradicting what she's saying under the surface. Subtext. It's such a simple concept that we give credit to Hemingway for coming up with it, but why are we giving credit to Hemingway for anything? Why don't we take what Hemingway said and replace it with a Taylor Swift song as a quick reference? But I did you could take most Taylor Swift songs this way. There's some that are more overt than others, but for example, years ago I did an analysis. I never did anything with it, but I did an analysis of her song "Love Story," where she compares the lovers in the situation to Romeo and Juliet, and it's this love story. And so it seems on the surface like just a nice, lighthearted love story. But she hopefully recognizes that Romeo and Juliet is not a positive love story. So subtextually, she's recognizing how it's just purely a fantasy. and that she's it's bound to fail and that sort of thing. And that sort of corresponds with other songs where she talks about wishing for a fairy tale, but what she gets is not a fairy tale. And that's, a lot of her earlier songs are like that. But then you have songs like Mean, one of my favorite songs, speaks to me on a personal level. But the lyric is, the chorus is, one day I'll be living in a big old city and all you'll ever be is mean. So it's a song about people being mean and it not bothering her, letting it just wash off like water on a duck's back. I don't know why I was going to that other terrible metaphor / cliche. But she's just brushing it off. But clearly it is bothering her. And she lived in, one day she did live in a big old city, and she became a big star. But still she's letting these little things bother her. Like lines like, well, you say that I can't sing, for example. That's clearly she's taking more contemporary criticism and integrating it into the song. And it bothers her. But she's, on the other hand, she's saying it doesn't bother her. But another just important factor, and I would say in creating characters and creating little moments and things like that, that's not her being hypocritical, and that's not her lying. It's not like she's saying, your cruelty doesn't bother me is a lie necessarily. She's just a human being, a paradoxical human being. This is where the rainbow circle comes in. That's level 2 on the rainbow circle. She's able to feel these two directly contradictory feelings. Genuinely, people being mean bothers her. Genuinely, people being mean doesn't bother her. It's like what Keats would call negative capability, but negative capability is just, again, not a great phrase for it. If you said Taylor Swift is a prime example of negative capability, it wouldn't be clear just from the term what that means. Just like you would say, Taylor Swift, she's great at the iceberg. Terrible metaphor for that particular force. But the playing drunk part of it, you can recognize this dynamic push and pull between the two forces. By trying to pretend you're not drunk, there's a dynamic push and pull between actually being drunk. By trying actively not to be bothered by mean comments, there's that dynamic push and pull between the two forces. And it's not necessarily that one's always below the other. They're sort of cycling through, the whole process is a lot more dynamic than the iceberg really covers. A more recent song, I think, that works on that same level. Well, Blank Spaces, I think, if you... Blank Space. Jeez, not Blank Spaces. Actually, I had a story called The Catastrophes, and it had a similar title, and that's why I always mix up that title. Blank Space. Blank Space, she overtly addresses this idea of having these different personalities and switching between them. Which is just, creating an interesting dynamic character. If you look at her character across multiple songs, and if you treat it as a consistent character across multiple songs, with a lot of inconsistencies, a lot of complicated inconsistencies, she makes a really fascinating character. But so yeah, Blank Space, she, overtly talks about that. And, a lot of... Stop. As my dogs are chewing up the room. And she'll bring up a lot of these little things that sort of create the character, that just repeated sort of phrases like, I get mad over the phone, or we were crying in the rain, or, my father didn't love me. apparently the father character that constantly shows up in her songs is not really similar to her actual father. But anyway, so interesting, fascinating character. But a recent song that I think is similar to that dynamic as Mean as You Need to Calm Down. Um, and the premise is it's similar to Mean, where she's reading mean comments on the internet and she's not letting that bother her. She's telling other people to calm down. So you have that simultaneous uh, direct reference to resistance of an emotion. So sort of like the playing drunk example, uh, where her telling others to calm down is essentially reflecting her own need to calm down. Her not being bothered with it has this direct contrast to an indication that she actually is bothered by it. And so having that relationship between the text and the subtext, where there's a dynamic push and pull between them, where they create friction with each other, that ends up creating a much more compelling and fascinating subtextual dynamic for the character. I keep saying dynamic, but that's what it needs to be to really effectively create this emotional complexity with the character. And icebergs are just not dynamic. So terrible metaphor. But yeah, I mean, calm. You need to calm down. It definitely has that. Her, and you can see that with like the Lizzo song recently. Lots of songs like that. I mean, it's pretty overt subtext. There's a Halsey song. There's a record of the records of my life. That those sorts of things. Where the dealing with the abusiveness. I just went to Survivors of Domestic Violence walk. Just came home from that. Survivors of abusiveness on really any level. The claim that the cruelty doesn't bother you, that I've moved on from the cruelty. You certainly have that dynamic push and pull of the need to move on, the need to calm down, versus the lingering emotion and what have you. Because I mean, if ultimately you need to calm down leads to actually calming down, there really wouldn't be a song there. There wouldn't really be a story. So that being said, I should do it. I should do an episode about Hocus Pocus by Kurt Vonnegut. There's an elevator scene in that book that reminds me of so much in the world. But I think I'll do a horror movie sequence just as for something lighthearted. But my need to do lighthearted subjects is very similar to that claim and you need to calm down. Just let it go, let it wash away. Let me do something kind of lighthearted. But anyway, Bo says goodnight. Bo says goodnight. Say goodnight, Bo. Say goodnight, Bo. See you on the next episode.